Welcome to episode 37 of the International Web Effectiveness Podcast, where Bill Hunt and I, Bill Scully, focus on the strategies and techniques necessary to improve your web presence and manage your global websites. If you haven't already, please make sure to follow us, the International Web Effectiveness Podcast. You can find it on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. And if you're enjoying these conversations, please leave us a quick review. It helps motivate us to continue to make episodes. In the last episode, we examined how AI is transforming the way companies approach SEO. You can check that out, episode 36, called SEO in the Age of AI, Future-Proof Strategies for Smarter Search Engines. Today, we're going to try a new format. We've invited two special guests, LeRoy and Jason Kilgore, who share our observations on the new challenge rising in our industry, the big lie being sold to leadership right now, that AI is some kind of instant replacement for people and processes. This episode was actually born from an article Nick wrote titled, Dear C-Suite, Stop Betting Your Future on the AI Shortcut. Based on that, it generated a conversation with Bill Hunt on LinkedIn, and we'll have a link in the notes for that. So, welcome, Nick LeRoy and Jason Kilgore. Why don't each of you tell our listeners a little bit about yourselves? Nick, you can start.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for having me. Again, Nick, I have been doing SEO for 15 years, which is not anything special with this group of people. The first 10 years was agency side, and for the last 5 years, I've been out on my own. As Bill was kind enough to say, I write the SEO for Lunch newsletter, and some people might know me as the owner of SEOjobs.com and PPCjobs.com. So if you're looking for a role, check it out.
Great, thanks. Jason?
Thanks. Jason Kilgore, Associate Director of SEO in the legal division at Internet Brands, and also managing member of Contractor Near You LLC. I have about 30 years of work experience with technology companies such as Dell and Apple, and then also content companies like Thomson Reuters and Internet Brands. Recently, my organization was a finalist in the 2024 Search Engine Land Awards for Best In-House SEO Initiative. And to sort of, wrap up my experience in 3 sentences or less, I went to work for a technology company because of my aptitudes. I shifted my career to focus on search because I found my calling. And then I became a leader in search to build organizations and resilient businesses which rely on search traffic.
Great, thanks. All right, Bill, I think you have some questions you're going to ask.
I do. So, Nick, we're going to start with you. In your article, you call out this easy button mindset. And I think actually in your LinkedIn post promoting it, you said this is a conversation many of us aren't going to want to have or see. And I think you go through this idea that, and as Bill mentioned, that many leaders fall for the idea that AI can be this instant replacement for people and process. We've all seen on LinkedIn people, talking about their whole team was made redundant because the company decided it can all be done with AI. So what are they missing, and why did you write the article that, really calls BS on this easy button mindset?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the biggest thing that we've got to address is, I'm intentionally not trying to out any company or any one particular leader. The cruel reality is they have their feet to the fire to make sure that they are as profitable as soon as they possibly can. So what it does is it rewards them by making short-term decisions versus potentially longer-term decisions. And that's why people are cutting roles, because it makes the P&L look great today. So the other part of it is just that it's not actually an easy button. We're not truly just throwing a couple $100 at ChatGPT and now all of a sudden we're replacing people with, 6-figure budgets. The reality is these AI tools are fantastic at augmenting, existing employees who are working through tasks, but they don't necessarily replace them because you're not going to gain the efficiencies that you want to make up for it. And more importantly, you're going to be losing what I think you'll hear quite a few times in our bigger conversation is the critical thinking, historical context, being able to make snap judgment calls, those are all things that make us as humans special and isn't something that can easily be replicated by AI.
Cool. And I want to pick up on that. What makes humans special? And then, Jason, this is the question for you. From your perspective and knowledge and experience, and I think especially, some of the places that you've worked and the work that you're doing currently, where do humans fit into this process? And as Nick said, it's not easy to simply replace them. And what is it that people bring to the equation, and why it's not replaceable? And then what's the next thing, or how should we be thinking about this, fitting it into a business context?
Sure. I would say, for what AI can't replace, two attributes are worth highlighting: intuition and influence, right? So there's determining what the next right thing is that your platform needs to succeed in search, right? And then how do you sell that to those who own the approval process? SEO has always been about actions that will allow a website to perform better than its peers over the long term, right? Learn how to derive that next right thing, right? And have conversations and get buy-in with stakeholders that will help move that forward, right? Be an advocate for the judicious use of resources. Okay, so that's intuition. For influence, SEO is a team sport, right? SEO teams and organizations, we have a unique and what could only be described as a conditional role, right? So sometimes we're the quarterback, right? We're deciding what project to prioritize and move on. Sometimes we're the linebacker, right? We're defending and advocating for resources that are dedicated to a different team. Sometimes we're the wide receiver, right? Sometimes we're even the cheerleader. As an example close to home, 2 weeks ago, I was the loudest voice of appreciation for a product-led initiative because of how meaningfully it improved the searcher intent satisfaction with that redesigned page template. I got up on a soapbox in a leadership meeting. I made it crystal clear for everyone, even, executives on the call, actually, especially executives on the call, that by improving the identified KPIs, which in this case were all around user engagement, well, guess what? Fewer searchers are going to go back to search, which means that over the next 13 months, right, we're going to accumulate 13 months of improving engagement signals to those URL patterns, right? So it's important to celebrate wins and to, everyone wins, right? That's great. But equally important is to give credit to the precise sources of value that those wins created, right? It's incumbent upon us as SEOs to know to the extent possible Google's ranking systems. Learn them by heart, be able to recite them in your sleep, right? The more business leaders develop an appreciation in alignment with ours of the value unlocked by any SEO investment, whether it's a business case, a feature, functionality, or capability, the safer and more insulated the business is going to be from poor and uninformed decision making.
I love you, man. We're big believers in SEO as a team sport. We actually have an episode 24 about that specifically.
I owe you a quarter for using it then.
And I think that's key. And then, obviously given your background, literal background, Nick, the football metaphor, I think plays well in there. And I think it is exactly that. And I think one of the things you talk about, a race to the bottom, and the people part of this. And I think as Jason just articulated well, it's the people that need to understand this, because one of my frustrations with the way a lot of people are thinking about AI and just throwing tools at it is these need to be trained by someone. They need skilled operators. And I think, Jason, you're getting up on the soapbox and saying, hey, we need to think about this, and this is good, and these features and functions, work for our audience. So, Nick, when you're talking about the race to the bottom, and that we still need people to be part of the equation. Can you elaborate a little more on that and maybe sort of, pick up the ball from Jason and run with that metaphor?
All right, I'm going straight for the touchdown here. But here's, in the huddle, this is what I'm going to be telling people. The reality, whether we like it or not, is that AI is not creating new information. What it is doing is it continues to consume, for better or for worse, all this information, aggregates it, and spits it out. Now, the reason that I harp on that is because if you literally replace everybody with AI, that means the best performance that you can have is based off of yesterday's data. And in a world that rewards, testing and just trying out things, people that are able to be first movers get rewarded for it. So the first step of claiming, your easy button is by taking ownership of you're willing to never be the person who breaks the new strategy or figures it out first. And I just think that sets a really bad precedent for your brand. The marketers that do have hearts physically, that are there, always have to know that they're kind of second best. And I think it's going to have a ripple effect. And it's going to get down to, now if you're a service provider, people don't want to work with you if you're not going to ever provide cutting edge. People don't want to buy your products if it's as good as yesterday's product at best. And then brand goes to hell. I mean, this is, to me, it's a trickle effect. As I had mentioned, it just continues to go down. And then the only lever leaders have is they then compete on price. And I think the four of us here would agree, if you are getting to that level, you might as well pack up your business. I don't care what you sell. Once you compete on price, you've lost.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And then let's take that angle one step further. And Jason, you're part of an in-house team managing not just SEO, but all kinds of performance type things. And one thing you mentioned before was trying to make the business case for things. Two parts to my question. One is, where do you see AI specifically impacting good and bad internal teams? And then two, I think to Nick's point, trying to find the business value of both in that equation. So again, two-part question for you. What's the impact on in-house? And then two, from your experience, how might we be able to use it to maybe build justifications for doing more of the stuff to bring value to the actual people?
Yeah, it's a really good questions. I'll start with the fact that, look, AI in its implementation is an easy button. And humans are designed to gravitate towards the easy button. We have biases, and those get developed very, and the easier the easy button is, the more we latch onto it. So that's what we have to guard against. For the second part of your question, I get asked this question in various forms. Where AI is going to take in-house or agency teams in the next 3 to 5 years, and how things are going to evolve. I have two axioms that I go to using my own bias, right, to explain my perspective, and those are specialization is differentiation, and context is king, right? So before generative AI, content was king, and now the game has shifted to context. So I don't believe that AI will replace SEO, but I do believe that an SEO that uses AI effectively and efficiently will replace an SEO that doesn't. Right. Now, what generative AI does well, and I think, Nick, you summed this up really well earlier, is use a corpus of content to create consensus, right? And sometimes that content is text, it can be usage data, it can be other information, but there's, information that it synopsizes, right? The problem is that consensus is often incorrect, right? And so let me break down the challenge, and how SEO teams can become specialized, right? So the challenge for in-house SEOs is determining what specialization you need to develop, whether that's topical expertise or technology development capabilities, right? Think like vibe coding, to move a website that you're responsible for in a more sustainably favorable direction, right? In a position in search. Evaluate the opportunities that you find and then influence internal teams to move on those. My recommendation to in-house teams would be to lean into specialization. I mean, nobody can know the nuance of your CMS like you do. Agencies, by contrast, well, they'll need to focus on two things. First, to continue going after the soup du jour, right? Whatever nomenclature, AEO, GEO, EIEIO. I think I heard one today that it combined GAS. EO. So we had gas. If we gave the industry gas EO. Anyways, whatever gets signatures on contracts and separates businesses from dollars, that's one. Second, unlock real value by specializing in understanding and unpacking the searcher journey, right? Find pain points and create the content needed to reduce that friction in that journey. And that journey may not be solely on Google anymore. It might touch ChatGPT, right? You can find other ways to create value. Generally, and final point on agency, in-house teams generally don't own the user experience, right? That's usually a product function, right? Or maybe it's an SEO collaboration with editorial teams, right? I believe the searcher journey specialization is likely going to be where agencies can create the most value for their customers. So taking a step back, I need to get on one more soapbox about specialization. In a business context, right? Specialization is a superpower. And that superpower is that it becomes easier to achieve and maintain relative scale within a narrower focus of expertise, right? The smaller the targeted market and the fixed costs associated with serving it, well, that drives a higher break-even market share, right? And correspondingly, less competition, right? So specialization could be geographic, but what's most compelling is like product market specialization. So rounding out this answer, I want to close with an example that's really close to home. Google dominates search in the US, but at last look, Amazon has a majority of product searches, right? Although product search is a very small part of search in the big, given how close in proximity it is to the bottom of the funnel, this is among the most valuable slice of the pie. So get specialized and play to your strengths.
Good answer.
I have to say, it's very hard for me to, not just be ecstatic with everything you just said, especially the latter part, because this is the kind of stuff I've been trying to write about recently. There's one that I have been holding on to that I floated with a couple people, and they're like, dude, that shit went over my head. The one thing you just said about product, I don't know if you heard when Walmart recently did a product launch. I forget their code name for it, but they literally said in their announcement, this would be a Google killer. And they believed it was going to be a Google killer because exactly what you just said about Amazon and product search. People just automatically assume Amazon's going to have it, so I go to Amazon and look for it. Why would I go to Google to see it when I know Amazon probably has it? It's the same thing that Walmart's done when Walmart brought in all of these other partners, to backfill what they had in their catalog. And as somebody that's worked with companies for probably 20 years to get into Walmart, that's a fascinating process. And when they're starting to talk about if they can get people to think that Walmart is a place to come for any kind of product, their competition really isn't the Google, it's the Amazon. Mm-hmm. Right. And if you look at, if you follow the money, and I think this is the problem when you start to think like an MBA sometimes, shareholder value and everything you just said, Jason, is all about capital efficiency and how do we have people solve the problem? And that's what all this is about. And I'm going to try to stay off my tangents and get to the next question that I know Bill wants to ask. But this idea is this is why all this has to change. And I think we're seeing an article I wrote recently was about there's 4 groups of people right now. There's the SEO purists that say all this is just features, new features in SEO. So think about SEO and none of the acronyms. Then there's a group of people that are saying, no, it's the acronyms because it's the functionality of these new features like Answer Engine. And I'm guilty of this because I wrote like 9 articles about, you need a VP of answers. And it's just somebody focusing on answering someone's damn question. And then the third group are the people that are forward thinking that are saying, hey, search has been damaged irreversibly by all the hucksters and people that are the hucksters around the alphabet soup that's out there. So let's elevate it to a strategic level, because for the first time, I think in my 30 years experience in search, we have C-level attention, and we only have C-level attention because they've lost traffic because of zero click and because Google and whomever is answering the question. So I get where they're trying to rebrand this, but I think at the end of the day, all this has caused so much confusion and so much friction that people are dead in the water. I mean, the number of companies that have paused budgets because they don't know where to go next. I've had 5 people tell me that half of their budget was cut to go to one of these 3 AI search solutions that have all gotten multi-million-dollar investments. Right? Half of their budget, because here's somebody that couldn't afford a subscription to SEMrush before, now cut half of their budget to pay for one of these magical tools that does nothing but look at who was cited and then puke out content to basically get you into the places that are being cited, right? And I think that's the damage that's being done. It's created this paralysis. And so, Bill, I think you've got the other question for the group that, and I'll tee it up really briefly. You're sitting in front of a CEO who's on the fence of what do I do? And I'll let you ask the actual question.
No, finish it.
And that's what it is. You're in front of this person. And I think, Nick, and Jason too, you talked about your soapbox that, your executives are saying, hey, I want to pivot to this, whether it's the latest, greatest, super AI VC invested tool, or it's just, I want to reorchestrate our business around AI as being an easy button solution. How would you, get them to think about what they're asking and guide them into what's probably the more efficient use of capital and the most of both human and physical capital? How would you approach that conversation? You've just been asked, I want to use AI. I want to go double down, triple down on it.
But
what do I do?
Also, but in the context of slashing budgets. So
and slashing budget. Yeah.
So replacing people, replacing processes, and so you're sitting in front of a CEO. They see AI as a way to slash budgets. How do you approach the conversation so that they view AI as a growth multiplier instead of a cost-cutting tool?
Well, I think the one thing that I do want to say real quick is I think this is a perfect example of going back to like what Jason was saying, as well as Bill, of like, what are the components that make humans unique versus AI? And these are the skills that's going to help you, quote unquote, win this conversation. So being the data dork that I am, I want to look at the data and I want to be able to storytell. And the very first thing I would say, and I don't feel like we talk about this enough in our industry, is there are a bunch of sites that are losing 30, 40, I've seen 50% of organic traffic gone. And everybody just wants to jump ship. So the very first thing I would say to the CEO is, let's just say it is 50% impact. Do you know how large the remaining 50% is? We're putting a gazillion dollars towards AI tools and whatever shiny objects, people are getting excited about. And we're seeing 1, 2, 3%, increase in traffic. That's not making up for the 50% that we lost. So I'd be having these conversations of saying, like, we need to be forward thinking, but that's how we adopt AI in our processes so that we can already do what we know is working, and the processes that historically have taken a lot of time to get stuff done. We need to use these tools. And I just posted on the SEO for Lunch last week this idea of like talent pipelines, because the thing that we're going to be stuck with, and we're not going to see this for another 5 years, is leaders are going to cut people, replace them with AI. And then what happens when that entire generation retires? Like, who's going to run the next generation of these companies? Should ChatGPT do that? Like, so I'm going to go on a tangent, but I think I would go there. So, I mean, but again, bringing the data makes it real, but then I can bring some of the passion of just saying, like, there's a little bit of, we know as the four of us, when we're talking to clients, there's the raw opportunity. And if that number isn't exciting, then what you get to pitch is the fear of missing out on the bigger opportunity somebody else already has or could have.
Yeah, I think this feels a lot like the outsourcing craze where, cheaper, faster until the quality dropped and the customer experience tanked. We're going to see similar things as people put more investment into AI and not keep the people involved in the process.
Yeah, the heart of the problem is what will make your business more resilient, right? Now, there's a hard reality that process and culture don't have the resilience of structural advantages, right? Now, think like a natural monopoly, right? Or a patented critical proprietary technology, or, a long-term government contract. It doesn't matter how good a competitor is in their operations if they don't have that government contract. That's one point I would make. As far as like using it to cut costs, and this starts talking towards the structural advantage piece of the answer. The way I would answer this is, well, it depends. The SEOs on the call
Good answer.
jump
Good
for
answer.
air, right? Mainly, it depends on the key supply and demand attributes for a given website or business, right? If you believe that SEO, or as some search industry trailblazers like to call it, web effectiveness, is strategically valuable either on the supply cost side or the demand revenue side, then, well, my advice would be to invest in developing your SEO talent, right? Put them in positions to learn the dynamics and the secret sauce of your business and gain influence cross-functionally, right? Help them learn how to be judicious and build business cases, or at the very least involve them in the conversations so that they learn what those key considerations for your business are. As a practical matter, I'd advise keeping an inventory of the fixed cost driven economies of scale enjoyed on the traffic supply side. What features of your business facilitates delivery of a largely identical product at a lower cost than your competitors, right? Where does that live? On the demand side, keep an inventory of what keeps various cohorts of your customer base from getting your product or service from a competitor, right? What are their costs of switching? How hard is it to find a comparable replacement in the market? How do you encourage habit, right? How do you get people to use your shit more, right? And in SEO context, the problem to solve is, how do you get people at large to Google your brand name next to what we have historically called the evergreen search terms that are relevant to your product or service? So the clearer a CEO's perspective is on the portfolio of supply and demand advantages, the better decision they'll make and you'll reinforce, right? Finally, I get one word of caution I would provide is avoid the trap of over anchoring to one side of the equation, whether it's the supply side or the demand side. One fundamental thing about supply side and demand side advantages is that neither of them are terribly durable on their own, right? And they're not, they don't operate in a vacuum. They are mutually reinforcing. It doesn't matter how in demand your product is if you don't produce very much. And it doesn't matter how much you produce if no one buys it, right? Where the magic happens is when scale on the supply side meets scale on the demand side. That's when a business is poised to really own the market where they play.
I want to remind people of our free Facebook group where we use that as an opportunity to discuss these things, and you can ask any questions you want. You can also suggest ideas for upcoming podcasts. You can find that by searching International Web Mastery Free Group. Yeah, I like that. I think, for me to answer that question, I'd say reframing AI not as a replacement tool, but as a force multiplier.
Mm-hmm.
Use it to accelerate creativity, testing, iteration, things that lead directly to growth, not just savings.
So here's one thing to think about real quick, and sorry, Bill, for jumping in before you, but we all want to talk about easy buttons and how we all gravitate towards it. What people don't realize is within the SEO space, AI can be maybe not an easy button, but certainly can be a fast forward button. And what I mean by that is I think the four of us, we probably cut our teeth in SEO by manually writing title tags, internal links, image alt tags until your nose bleeds. Like, this is all the stuff that AI can do incredibly. It can do it a heck of a lot faster, and they're basically an unpaid intern. So there's two options. Let's not have junior resources anymore because AI is more efficient and cost effective. Or we can look at it as a fast forward button and what we used to do for 2, 3, 4 years. And then we kind of got to that mid-level step where we started learning a lot more of these like critical thinking, how to effectively communicate, pulling and talking to data, and, even assigning, actual business value, talking about dollars and cents. These are things that junior resources can start on day one, because they don't have to necessarily know like every nuance of SEO. They can start by learning business. And I will die on this new hill that, building a business and a good brand equals SEO.
Yeah.
The days of building a site with SEO and having that establish into a brand and into a company are dead. We shouldn't even get into like affiliate sites because that's going to be a whole nother conversation.
Did I mention that I just launched Contractor Near You earlier this year, Nick? No, I'm just kidding.
There you go.
I'll be the exception that proves the rule. But no, I do want to riff off this because it's all about when you talk about productivity gains and how AI can facilitate that. There has to be measurement, right, of how that productivity gain influence positive business results, right? As it pertains to this conversation, I mean, really, it needs to be measured in problems solved and the outcomes from those solutions, right? So, there are three main KPIs for SEO, right? There's crawlability, indexation, and rankings, right? And the observable key results from improving that daisy chain of events is in content consumption or engagement with that content. So, I mean, that's your OKR right there. Is how searchers consumed whatever content you have that's out there.
I want to throw this in. You talk about KPIs. I said this, I think it was at my PubCon keynote. The interesting thing about SEOs, we have KPIs that we have no control over the mechanisms to achieve the KPIs. We can't affect how a website is built for the most part. We're not in there turning wrenches, but you're at the mercy of cajoling and convincing other people that they need to change their processes in order for us to hit our KPIs. And I think, Jason, that's dead on with, we need to look at the math. An interesting point that I think, you started your last discussion on, and Nick, it goes back to yours as well. I've not had anybody that I've talked to, and I'm not an active SEO practitioner anymore, but people ask me, I've not had anybody able to tell me how much and where their traffic's been impacted. But they will tell me we've lost 30, 40%. Like, I had a guy say that I had access to Search Console, and I looked in and he's like, I've lost 45% of my traffic. And Bill Scully actually built a really neat tool where we can extract, from Search Console. I think the one example I used got 53,000 rows, and then period 1 and then period 2, I got 54,000 rows, and compared them and said, what changed before and after? And showed him the words where he had lost traffic. And one was like holidays in Turkmenistan. And I said, have you ever booked a tour for holiday, and not holiday as in vacation, but literally the holidays? And he goes, never. And like, but that was one of the words you lost the most traffic for. And when we started going through this, a lot of the traffic lost were those information queries where there was no way, like now he's thinking about, oh, how do I monetize that? How do I, if somebody wants to know what's the biggest holiday, maybe I can write a block of content. This holiday is brilliant, like Diwali or something where there's a lot of color and there's festivities. It's a great time to come and visit. And he's like, I never thought of that, about that. I just had that because my SEO told me that's a big queried question. Let's have an answer for it. Let's bring people, and hopefully at some point in their lifetime, they'll remember the answer. They'll remember where they heard it, and they'll come to our site and book a tour to Turkmenistan. And it's like, dude, has that ever happened? And he's like, I don't think so. I'm like, okay, so maybe let's forego those queries and that KPI of just raw traffic and start to think about how do we double down and triple down on what's really moving the needle for you. And the last point I want to make, one of my sort of heroes right now in this zero click mindset and how they're pivoting their business is, Neil Vogel, who's the CEO of Dotdash Meredith. And, again, going back to Glenn Alsop in in my PubCon keynote, I showed that there was like these 8 or 10 groups of companies that own, like, I think, Glenn found it was like 87% of all, traffic. And you mentioned, Nick, around affiliates, that they're at the top of the funnel traffic. And so they got hit hard. And every investor call, that's what the investors want to know. And the analyst is, well, how are you going to recover from losing 45 to 65% of your Google traffic? And he goes, you know how we're going to do it? We're going to focus on the quality of the experience. We were chasing these one clicks that drove, 22 cents worth of revenue for us from all the ad crap we put up there. We totally obfuscated the user experience, trying to capitalize on getting as many ad units in front of them as we could to where they weren't enjoying the content. So now they're focusing on, let's build up our email list. Let's build up making this content where, people, it's not one-click ponies, but it's multiple experiences. And I think, Bill, you have a question coming up that's about that. How can we take the fact that we've now got zero click? And I just heard Ziff Davis at this city event said, we've already assumed zero click. Both Nick and I forget the CEO of Ziff Davis, Vivek, I think, both of them have said we're already running our business as if we would get zero traffic from Google going forward. And I think when somebody that derived almost all of their revenue or the majority of their revenue from the Google saying, let's just pretend we're not going to get another click from Google ever. How would we pivot our business? And I think, Bill, there is a question tied to this. What do we do now?
Yeah, not specific to that, but I have a couple. I think Nick hit it with the brands. I think people are going to start to think brands more than they have in the past, where in the past they thought Google first. So if you could build experiences on your site that get people to come back to your site, that's really one great way to shortcut the Google stuff. And another point I want to make is for my bigger B2B clients, yeah, their traffic's down, but their commercial KPIs haven't suffered. So, did it hurt that we lost that traffic? No, but now we have more valuable traffic, and maybe we should really double down to make the site really good experience for those highly qualified people.
So you're saying people should focus on web effectiveness.
There you go.
Well, and Bill, I think one or both of the Bills actually had said this early on. We being SEOs, I think we were at the first time ever where we are starting to be viewed as respected contributors to business. we always were relegated to the children's table. And what I mean by that is mom and dad, they made the business decisions, and then they go, oh, little Nick and Jason, go sprinkle your SEO dust on it and, get us in Google. And it was never a strategy that was baked into building a brand or building. It was, you are investing in manipulating Google or an algorithm or people to get, awareness. And I think the reality is now that we're taking kind of the awareness component of it out, like Bill was saying, holidays in random countries, like these are clicks that you probably never deserved. I mean, and hopefully what it's going to do is allow more people at the big table, and we can have conversations where we say, yep, visibility is down. I'm not going to count impression increases because impressions don't, pay my bills. And I think that's the one thing that drives me nuts. A lot of SEOs are trying to pivot to the only KPI they know that like AIOs are providing, which is more impressions. When the reality is we have to take all the marketing knowledge that we have, double down in solving business problems and helping lift the brand and the business, because that is ultimately how we get back to the comments you guys were saying about, brand first plus whatever we're looking at, which is that Amazon and that Walmart, because we may not be able to beat Amazon and Walmart directly, but we all have a corner of our niche or industry that we can be the Walmart of.
So I think given that, and I think Bill, one of the questions you had was, an actionable takeaway is what, and Jason and Nick, to your point, you're saying SEOs need to repivot to be at the grown-up table. What skills or what actions do they need to take to be there? And I know, Jason, you dropped a bunch of really cool economic terms that got me a little excited over here, being the economist of the group. But along that, what are the things that people need to think about? Should they go get an MBA so they can think about, capital efficiency or, supply side economics, demand side economics, or, to Nick's point, should we just know how to build a better business case? Should we know how to speak executive language? I know Bill and I, we've talked a couple times on episodes about, tying web effectiveness to shareholder value, which is another sort of MBA-ish word. But from you guys, what do you think is 2 or 3 things that either a junior SEO or an old crusty SEO that's been around, not yet ready to retire, what are things that they really should think about how to upskill or change skill or reskill or whatever word we want to use? And maybe it's another interesting one for you, Nick. What are you seeing on the job descriptions on your job sites? Are people looking for that maybe people don't have?
Yeah, so I'll jump in just real quick to answer those. So the 2 things that I would focus on most is 1, effective communication. I know I've said it many, many times, but as you guys had also said, it can be executive presentation, but there are so many good SEOs that can, run laps around all of us for our log analysis and our canonical tags and our robots. But I guarantee you, if you ever step into a conversation with the C-suite and spit out one of those words we just said, you've lost.
Yeah.
Like, period. It's a hard stop.
Eyes glazed over.
Yep. So how do you get in? It's not about, talking down to them, but speak their language. These are individuals that are incredibly busy, and they have 14.2 seconds to think about SEO. So you better be talking about money, and you better be talking about, the return. So I think that is a critical skill that we need to have. And then I think we had talked about, SEO jobs. What's really, really interesting is I think a lot of people assumed with these new acronyms that, there would be geo-specific positions, AIO positions, and I'm not seeing them. I mean, 1 or 2 pop up, and I think it's because people want to be associated with being a first mover. But what I'm seeing is routinely this is becoming another owned tactic or channel for organic search or organic visibility, I should say. So nearly every job description that I am going through has a mention of AI somewhere within there.
It's like ChatGPT. There was like, I think 100 and some comments to their $300,000 a year, maybe it was $400,000 a year job. And people thought it was ironic that ChatGPT, their job description for their content / SEO person wasn't littered with geo requirements. And it was interesting how many people thought that was crazy, that how can these guys, the epicenter of geo, not have geo requirements in their content / SEO job. So I think that's to your point, Nick. So Jason, what do you think?
Yeah, I would say for recommendations for my SEO brothers and sisters in arms, one of the things that I undervalued in earlier in my career was developing influence among leaders, right? And over anchoring to, hey, I found this really cool thing that can give us a boost in rankings if we deploy it at scale. And there's value in that. Don't get me wrong, but the ability to manage up, right, and influence upward, especially when you see a leader that's going in a direction that is counter to where you think they should be going rather, I would say approach those conversations with caution. The most important lesson I've found in managing up is that leaders hate criticism. And guess what? The higher they are in the organization, the more they hate it. And if approached poorly, it can be a career crippling move, right? So, my advice is the best way to point out something that's wrong without inciting a defensive reaction is to make it seem as if the decision was made for reasons other than their own personal judgment, right? They were forced to do it. It was sensible in the moment with the context they had, but now we learn more, right? And then you couldn't have anticipated the outcome, but now we know this, so we can, circumstances changed and now we need to change course. Look for catalysts for whatever path they want to take and learnings in the market for whatever their favorite AI platform is, how it changed, and then use that as a scapegoat for how we need to course correct. Second, the other recommendation I would provide is be curious. You can't replace that. 1,000 reasoned opinions are never as good as one case of just diving in and finding out. Personally, I've always had my own websites to experiment with, and that has led to unique insights which have applied to my day job. In an AI context, right? Generative AI is particularly good at coding. Right. I attribute this, outperformance with, creating PHP and HTML and whatever, insert your language there, to the rigorous and exacting structure of programming languages generally. I've personally used it to build over a dozen WordPress plugins this year with very specific use cases, right? So my recommendation is to learn how to use functions and break down those problems that you need to solve into smaller chunks, right? Because the reason I say that is the bigger the problem you present generative AI with, and the less context you provide it, the less helpful that output is going to be. And oftentimes in that world where it tries to solve something with a logical gap that you didn't fill, it'll create more problems than it solves.
And
Yeah,
Jason, I want to echo that. Sorry, go ahead, Bill.
I find more and more, even if I get more detailed, the more difficult the question, the more wrong the answer.
Mm-hmm.
It just makes stuff up. If it doesn't know it, it makes stuff up. So you need to be aware of that.
One of my hypotheses is that generative AI suffers from the second law of thermodynamics, where it has our same faults and our same virtues, but magnified because we created it.
Yeah, Jason, one thing I want to echo that you had said, because I realized I only gave my one recommendation despite saying I had two, but it's exactly what Jason had said. It's about being curious, and it's about actually doing the work, getting the reps. Nobody just steps up to the plate and starts bombing home runs. You got to take the at-bats. And here's one thing. I talked to an individual, I'll try not to get too detailed, but she was struggling to get a new job, and she had been in the industry for quite a while. And I asked her one question. I said, we are in a situation where SEO talent for the first time ever is greater than the demand for SEO services. And we have a lot of people looking for work. I said, what makes you stand out? And her response, and I think a lot of us, again, I'm not saying this to be mean to her, but it's the years of experience. Well, I've been doing this for so much, but okay, so is everybody else. Whereas I know I could speak for Jason, but I know both Bills, you have your own projects. It's like when I, was interviewing people, I didn't care what they knew about SEO for the most part, because I could teach them that. What I wanted to know is that you were passionate about anything and that you have a guitar website or you're active on Reddit. Like, show that initiative to learn and to be curious. And I will hire that person 9.9 out of 10 times for every role.
I can echo that. My agency, we never hired. I can't say never. There was one guy that we brought in that worked for us before. We never hired an experienced SEO. And then working with Jason's company, 18 years ago, we stopped hiring celebrity SEOs or popular SEOs and started hiring people that were exactly that, athletes, people that had critical reasoning skills, because what they do for their clients, they have to do it a specific way within the bounds of their CMS, the rules that, the bar association, everybody else creates. And so they had to break people of old habits and these methodologies. And so I think that's so true, is how can you demonstrate you have something that's complementary or specialized that other people may not be bringing to the table. And I think that's really valuable. And the last thing I would add, and I think, Bill, you probably have a closing question, going back to the be curious, there's a really cool functionality of AI is to challenge it. Like, I just did it today. I saw this they aggregated I think 29 different reports, and the site crashed because everybody wanted to see this massive report of the latest, greatest AI shit. And to me, it was nothing but a AI slop of consensus of consensus of consensus. And I said, tell me how this is wrong. And the first thing that, even because I wanted to test it, it had the number one thing by percentage, whatever cosine or whatever sort of coefficient, some nonsense like that. Well, it's not nonsense, it's science, but was schema. And I'm like, how did this get so high? And if you read their rigor, it was, we took the consensus from all of these studies. And so many people had conflated structured content with schema. And every report said structured content equals schema, which is not a true statement. And so that's why it was like a 0.89%. The highest scoring thing you could do was use schema. That to me invalidated everything, because all these people conflated a statement that was untrue. And because it was the consensus of 19 separate reports, it became the number one thing you should do. And so I tell people, go in and ask, why does this make sense? Or give me a contrarian view to this. And it goes back to being curious, asking, do the sniff test. Does this make sense? And I think that's key. So I don't know, Bill, do we have time for one more, or?
Well, I think we're going to try one more, but before we get to that, I just want to narrow down on this question. Maybe you can have one or two bullet points, everybody. What AI skills should an SEO or digital marketer have today?
Coding. Learn how to create functions in code. And if the technology that you want or need to create doesn't exist, go build it.
Yeah, I'll echo that, because I think what I'm going to say more directly is, don't rely on anybody else to make your dream come true, because what AI has helped us do is it's given us a tool to create MVPs without having to have six-figure budgets that we need to invest just to get validation. So it goes back to everything we were saying. It's like, just do it. Like, stop taking no as the answer and figure out why was it originally no, and use AI to get around it.
Love it.
Bill, you got one?
Critical reasoning.
Critical reasoning, yeah. And going back to what you said earlier, I think challenging the AI itself and the information, I think it's really important to get meaningful output from the models. I think that's really a competitive edge. I've been doing a lot of stuff, getting really deep into writing prompts, and that's freed up a lot of time and has helped me get really creative in solving some problems. All right, let's see. Yeah, let's try and get one more in here. What are some examples of companies that's successfully using AI to augment their teams? Does anyone have any?
I think I kind of had mentioned earlier the idea of taking your junior talent and being able to kind of elevate their roles and responsibilities, because we don't need people to manually map redirects anymore, but we can get a head start on some of your public speaking or your data analysis skills. And that's going to help you become a more effective business person / SEO. And that's just incredible.
Yeah, I can think of two examples in my current day job. And this was early on when, I think it was late 2023, ChatGPT, the hype had started to come down a little bit, but we actually used it to do like keyword clustering and topic mapping. I mean, as an LLM, that's kind of what it does really well. So from a language standpoint, we haven't used it obviously to create the content for us, because again, it's like, well, what are you creating that is differentiated and specialized, and so what are you building that others can't? We haven't obviously, and I'll die on the hill that we shouldn't go down that path. The other example is the technology and coding piece. So this is on a side project, the contractor site. One of the problems we had had to do with MySQL and databases, and how it had to query certain tables in certain ways in order to render the HTML of the page. So I created, and this took the better part of a weekend to plan out how to create the plugin that would crawl the site such that it would stay in Cloudflare's edge, right? So do it in a way, create the technology to do the internal crawling. It was a really cool project, but again, that's another sort of use case for creating technology that will help you achieve the things that you do. Now, one of the things that we found is our response time in Search Console went from like 3,000 milliseconds down to like 500 milliseconds. So that's a great case of showing, hey, this is the KPI we're trying to influence, our response time. And then so let's create the solution to influence that.
That's great.
Cool.
Bill, you have something? Anything?
No, it is similar to that, mining data. And then, like Jason was saying, an interesting thing my son was doing with someone is he was using Claude to run scenarios on code compression and code routing. So it's very similar. They have a lookup table that they go back into, I think it's Nutch or something like that. And he ran like, I think, said, give me different scenarios where we could reduce that call time, and almost identical to what you were talking about, Jason, the sequence of calls, how they were building the joins to get the extract. And so he wrote that logic, being a SQL person coming out of TripAdvisor. That's how he used it. And then now that company has basically written that into their workflow to say, anytime we're going to make a change to our data structure or anything, we're going to run scenario planning to see speed of crawls, frequency of crawls, sequence of crawls, or just, data assembly. I think, again, it gets back to creative ways that you can use technology that can think exponentially faster than potentially a human can.
That's cool. I can say that I've used it to put together some product feeds where manufacturing company worked with 100 distributors, and their current feed to the distributors was really weak, and we were able to blow out a whole lot of different meta and better descriptions. And I'm also doing a lot of stuff right now in N8N, just playing around with it right now. I haven't used it for any specific clients, but from an analysis standpoint, if you could give it a spreadsheet, man, you can do all kinds of stuff with it if you prompt it correctly. All right. Thanks, guys. Final thoughts?
Yeah, I can go first. So I'd start with history doesn't repeat, but it does rhyme. AI is poised to do to the economics, Bill Hunt, a hat tip to you, economics of the internet, that the advancement of the internet writ large did to newspaper economics. I would note that newspapers morphed into what we now call media and information businesses, and the underlying demand for that content didn't diminish. AI cannot replicate human intuition and influence. It can help you build things, but it can't tell you what to build, right? Empower your organization to fairly handicap your competitors in the places where you play. And my closing thought would be to recommend to my SEO brethren, my brothers and sisters in arms, never stop learning. Once you've learned the basics of crawling, indexing, and ranking, then develop your intuition for the next right thing to do to reinforce the effectiveness of a website. Once you've got that under your belt, learn business strategy. Michael Porter's 5 Forces framework is a great place to start. Now, there are practical difficulties in applying Porter's 5 Forces to digital environments, which is why your specialization in search will be uniquely valuable to your business leaders.
And I think mine is just pretty simple. I mean, what did we really learn from this whole situation? We've been talking for years and years and years about we don't want to be fully reliant on Google. And I think this is a really good reminder that like your owned property, owning your audience is king. It's not content, it's not links. Leverage, Google and Reddit and all this stuff as an opportunity to amplify, but do not build your business off the back of somebody else's company.
Great.
Perfect.
All right. So why don't you guys tell people where they can reach out and find you?
You can find me at nickleroy.com. I'm on Twitter, X at nickleroy. And then I'm probably most active on LinkedIn. And you can find me just by doing a quick search that way.
Yep, I'm most active on LinkedIn. Jason A. Kilgore is the URL slug. And then also I do have Blue Sky, Jason Kilgore. And again, I do want to thank both Bills and Nick. It's been a great conversation, and thank you so much for the rich and deep conversation about a very shallow easy button.
Thanks. Yeah, this has been good. I really appreciate you guys coming on. I think this is a good format. We'll probably do it again and invite you back sometime. So just a couple of things to wrap up here. So Bill Hunt has been writing a biweekly series on web effectiveness in search and getting executive support. And you can find that on Search Engine Journal. So be sure to check out that series. I think you also started a Substack. You could subscribe to that there. I actually, that prompts me more than anything else to read your articles. So keep posting there. That's good.
Cool.
Bill and I will both be presenting as judges at the U.S. Search Engine Awards in New York City on September 17th. And, we hope you're finding value in our conversations. If you enjoyed the show, we'd really appreciate it if you take a moment and rate and review the podcast. We also want to hear from you. Your feedback helps motivate us and keeps us making these podcasts. You can follow International Web Mastery on LinkedIn, Facebook, and X. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. Have a good one.
Hey, this is Bill Scully. I just wanted to let you know that we have a free training course called Demystifying hreflang. It includes 6 modules and is over an hour long with a quiz at the end of each module. You can find it at internationalwebmastery.com. Hope to see you there.